They say people don't leave bad jobs, they leave bad bosses. What made you leave? My manager hasn't been great pre-pandemic, but as soon as our company was forced to shift to mostly WFH, she lost it. She demanded unpaid overtime and is of the mindset that WFH is always going to be less productive than working in office, because she says she gets 1/4 of her own work done when WFH. She also volunteered our department as the pilot project to go back into the office when cases were at an all-time high. But she herself was not coming in. In addition, she has demanded higher standards and tighter deadlines amidst the pandemic and does not support us, even when our clients are in the wrong. We've had a lot of our team members leave for better jobs recently, and everyone is looking to do the same. Story 2, I had a boss who would scream in my face so often. I started to strategize how I would handle it when she finally hauled off and hit me. She never did, but she did eventually lose her job after being accused of child abuse. I quit before the child abuse stuff, and I will never ever forget the day I quit. The grand boss saying, "We really value you. We're sorry to see you go." After years of working under an abusive supervisor, complete with formal complaints and documentation, that remains the most hollow thing anyone has ever said to me in a professional environment. Story 3. As a nanny, it's weird when your boss is a mom with no actual experience in being a boss. The worst boss I worked for wasn't that bad when I first started working for her. Over the course of the year, she kept adding more things for me to do. I wasn't just taking care of the baby. I became their maid too, with no pay increase. Eventually, it got even worse, and I was basically her personal assistant. She got a taste of power and completely abused it. As a young 19-year-old, it was hard for me to see how bad the situation was. It wasn't an overnight thing. I was eventually fired. The day after I was fired, she called me asking where I was. By that time, the job was so bad. I did everything in that house, from taking care of the baby to hand-washing the mom's delicates. She got me a uniform and would reprimand me if it wasn't kept well. Same with hair and makeup requirements. She was a couple weeks pregnant with baby 2 and would suggest I become a wet nurse for them. After I was fired, I never went back. This lady flipped out and showed up at my house. Story 4, probably the worst boss I ever had, was at a McDonald's. We had a younger manager for the first 10 or so months I was there. Then, they decided to bring in a second manager from another store. For the first week or so, he was fine, until one day one of the 16-year-old girls that usually works drive-thru was put on the grill for no reason. She got grease on her shirt, and the manager said she looked like a pig and to clean it or go home. She left crying. The next day, another underage kid asked to just get a drink of water after a 3-hour nonstop rush. The kid looked like he was about to pass out. The manager told him no, so he said he'd drink from the sink in the back. He told him if he did that, he would send him home. I lost my crap when I heard that. Basically told him to duck off and left. Never went back. I heard that a month later he was fired. Story 5. I had been running the restaurant for weekend nights for 3 years. These were not easy shifts, 5 p.m. to 3 a.m. Still, I was a night owl and it was my pleasure. I took some days off and went to a hot spring with my now wife. Upon driving home, I noticed my leg hurt and within 2 hours, was in the hospital for an infection that would take 3 antibiotics at once to deal with. I called in sick 3 days in advance. My AGM told me it was cool, heal up, and that they would cover my shift. They did not. For my first infraction, I was put on final warning and 1 step from being fired. After all the years of work, I put in 3 weeks' notice the next day. Duck you illegal Pete's. It was Boulder. Pete's isn't a bad place. I still have friends who work there. They just chew people up and spit them out when they are done with them like the rest of food service. They have enough money to, not do that, but here we are. Just another burrito counter. Story 6. HR discussing private matters about staff to other staff. She was a disgusting person in general anyway, and many other things, but this was the final straw. Story 7. The client let slip how much they were paying for me. In 1 month, they paid more than my annual salary. I asked my boss for a pay raise and was told there was just no money available. I said I'd give them 6 weeks to find the money, and she laughed at me as I wasn't the type to give ultimations. When I handed my notice in, after securing a better offer from another company, my boss's boss offered me a 50% raise to stay. Story 8. I was 19, working my first job. He criticized my lipstick, saying that it was an ugly color, recommending that I wore a bright red lip to go with my bright red uniform shirt. He didn't like my choice of all black shoes. He didn't like the way I mopped the floor, taking the mop from me to show me how to properly do it. He even told one of my coworkers that she couldn't wear a sports bra under her uniform. I quit a few days later. Story 9. I'd kill it with my efficiency scores all quarter. But when the time came for raises, I was given an impossible task. When I couldn't complete it, that was the reason cited for not giving me a raise. Our company grew and became more and more profitable because the jobs were getting bigger and bigger, and a lot of us would stay late and work overtime. But hardly anyone was getting raises. If they were, it was a cost of living raise being passed off as a genuine raise. So I figured I could take my skills elsewhere and changed careers. Story 10. My boss was fine. The company was terrible. When I realized I didn't have a pension and could get one at a competitor, I booted story 11. Currently trying to leave. I'm salary. If I work any amount under 40, she docks it. If I work over 40, I get my salary pay. A few weeks ago, I worked 2 days out of the week, then discovered I'd been around a pandemic-positive person, and I started developing symptoms. Work sent me home, I got a test, and work had me stay home until I got the results. 4 days later, negative. Even though I'm salary, my paycheck showed up hundreds of dollars less than normal, and my boss didn't bother to tell me my paycheck would be significantly less. Luckily, I went to HR, and they told her she couldn't do that. She later called me and apologized, saying she didn't know she had to pay me. This, amongst many other terrible things she does, is why I'm trying to get out of there. Story 12. I left Journeys because everyone except me came down with COVID and I was a new hire, but instead of finding people to come work and train me or shut the store down, they just said I had to do it all alone, so I left. I'm all for being thrown to the wolves if I have the knowledge to handle it, but not when I can't even do returns yet. Story 13. Being called into my manager's office to be coached because I missed 1 day of work in a 2-month time span to attend my aunt's funeral. The first thing the manager said was, "I would have done the same thing." She then proceeded to have me sign paperwork, instructing how to avoid absenteeism to put in my work record. That day, I decided to nope the heck out of there. Story 14. I work home care. My boss is typically the family I work for. It's always the families that are the reason I leave, never my clients. Families are the worst. The one that sticks out the most is a mom who got pissed off at me because I planned on taking a week off. I had worked for her for 5 years, taking care of her very handicapped child. I don't get paid if I take time off, so I had planned accordingly. She told me that I needed to make that time up, that she had no idea what she was going to do with her child while I was gone. I was one of 4 home aides. She had plenty of help. I told her I did not need to make any time up. I don't get paid for not being there, so it wasn't my problem, and I guess she would have to take care of her own kid. She didn't like that answer. I went on my vacation and decided I had had enough of her. Assistant wasn't a bad kid at all, spoiled rotten because of all the issues, but otherwise, a decent kid. But I could not take that mom anymore. After a week or two, got new case, moved on with my life. But it's always the families that I hate, never the clients. I've had some of the absolute best clients. Then it's just a matter of if I'm willing to tolerate their family. Story 15. I get to tell this story again. Used to work at Comcast Boo Hiss, and I had aspirations to move up into management. I was pretty green to the corporate world, so I thought that helping my supervisor with her job would help move me up. And by help, I mean my supervisor made me do her entire job. I ran her meetings, did scheduling, went through her paperwork, etc., all while she sat at her desk playing Candy Crush on her iPad. I did all this while working on the phone. I did this for months, until one day I snapped on a customer. Now, I take full responsibility for what I did, but that wasn't good enough for her. Nope, she had to sit me down and humiliate me in front of the upper management. For an hour and a half, she made me listen to a recording of my entire duck-up, while pausing it every few minutes to say something like, "How could you?" I was in tears at the end, and she just used that to show how bad of an employee I am and how good a boss she is for helping me learn from my mistakes. She then pushed for me to receive a final notice. If I went out of line one more time for a year, I'd lose my job. She wasn't going to fire me. I was going to do that for her. HAR was predictably useless, as were my friends in management. Now that I had gone from being an up-and-coming star to a pariah, people didn't give a crap about me, except my supervisor, who still expected me to do her ducking job. My next few days were filled with a considerable amount of crying. What followed was rage. Endless, white-hot rage. I didn't quit. I didn't give up. Instead, I decided the best revenge was success. I went back to school to finish my degree. After a while, I was offered an internship, which I took, while I was fighting an uphill battle at Comcast 40 hours a week. I was at an internship 20 hours a week while being a full-time student, and I let my supervisor know this. "Sorry, boss," I'd say, "I can't do this report for you. I have a final to study for. Want me to stay late? No can do. My internship is working me hard, so I want to spend my night off at home doing nothing." I basically ignored her whenever possible. If she asked me, emailed me a question relating to my job, I'd respond. But if she sent out a group email about some incentive plan, I would send it to the trash. At one point, she pulled me into a meeting, which was actually just me and her, where she basically antagonized me and repeatedly told me, "You don't know me." That was really awkward, by the way. This went on for that year I was on probation, and during that time, I always kept my sales numbers low, not low enough to get fired, but just at the point where people could see I wasn't trying. This affected my commission, but it was so worth it. Why? 3 months before my probation was over, I had the option to switch to another supervisor, which I did with gusto. Those last 3 months upped my effort, and my new supervisor saw my sales numbers skyrocket. I had intentionally undercut my commission to make my old boss look bad. The upper management saw how my new supervisor succeeded in 1 month, where my older supervisor failed in 9, and it pleased me to no end that I humiliated her, like how she humiliated me. On the 1-year anniversary to the day of my probation, I put in my 2-week notice. In my exit interview, I let them know what I did with my life. I omitted the undercutting part, and that I spent the last year becoming a better person just to spite Comcast, and that I waited to quit until after my probation was over. Story 16. I can totally relate to this. After working for the same company for 17 years and always getting praise for my work, I finally got a position in a department I'd always wanted. My manager was excited to have me and continued to praise me. Then one night when I was on call, we got an urgent page, which was sent to my phone, and my phone didn't ring. So my manager was called. She texted me a few times. Well, I don't have my texting set to be very loud. Suffice to say she was kind of PO'd the next day. I apologized that my phone hadn't worked properly for the call and explained that if she'd tried to call me instead of text, it probably would have been fine. And besides, my backup coworker had got the call and fixed it really fast. I mean, that's what backups are for, right? She wouldn't have it, kept telling me I'd screwed up and that it better not happen again. Suggested I get another phone as my backup. What? I apologized again, but said, look, what happened could happen to anyone. Mistakes happen. My backup got the call and handled it anyway. Besides, it really wasn't super urgent. She would not let it go. The kicker is, she'd never started out asking me why I'd missed the call. Her immediate response before we even sat down to talk about it was along the lines of, Maelstrom, you missed this important call, so your backup had to fix it, and he should not have had to. You're in trouble. Our relationship went downhill from there. Mind you, I'd put 17 years into this place. Was a great employee, had lots of respect from my peers and hers. I would get up early and work late to accommodate our customers' schedules, put in time on my days off for truly urgent issues, and never got out pay. I didn't mind. I liked the job and got paid well. After a few months, she and I ended up sitting with an HR rep who tried to mediate a truce between us. Problem was, he was mostly on her side, just kept bringing up the very few times I had not performed up to par, and totally missing the context every time. Like, boss lady tells me there was this one email where you were a little rude to the customer. Is that true? Me. Well, let me explain the situation. HR rep. No, just answer the question. Were you rude? Me. Well, yes, a bit, I suppose. HR rep then proceeds to move on to the next damning question. After a bit of this, I looked across the table at my boss and said, Boss, is any of this situation going to change with you? She just looked at HR rep. Okay, that's what I thought. I stood up, threw my security badge on the table, grabbed my personal bag, which I had prepared for just such an eventuality, and said, I quit, and walked out. Funny thing is, the HR rep followed me out the door, calling after me. Maelstrom, we don't want this. I turned around. Neither did I. I felt so good driving home. I've got a much better job where I'm much more appreciated now. Story 17. 2 days off for the birth of my first child, and a write-up the day I returned because my wife had been in labor too long. They fired her for being pregnant. Story 18. Worked in an agency environment, big clients and big expectations, but we had a fairly small staff for all the projects we took on. Late nights were expected, and some nights I barely had time to eat before I had to sleep to go in tomorrow. Me and a few others tried to ask for structural change to get some breathing room between projects. We were always ignored by upper management and my boss, but hey, they get us pizza after a big project, so we can't complain, right? I was tired, frustrated, and felt like I was just a tool for the man. We worked late and never got anything back from the company. So I sent out applications, found a bigger company with a cool culture. They offered me a gigantic pay raise, plus better benefits. I went to my boss to hand in my resignation. I gave him 2 weeks' notice. This is somehow a 30-minute conversation telling me how miserable I'll be at this other company and how good I had it here. I hadn't even mentioned the name of the new company, so I knew he was talking straight B's. I went back to work, thinking I had my 2 weeks confirmed. However, my boss then pulls me back into his office and says he's going to let me go today, like right now. Get your things and get out. I did so, never looked back. My new job is great, by the way. Better boss, better work, better life. Story 19, a now former colleague and I both applied for a more senior position that had become vacant. I had vastly more experience, having had a similar role in the past. I was better qualified and frankly, a better fit for the job. Even prior to interview, the senior management had already decided They wanted to offer my colleague the position. Unfortunately, nepotism prevailed, and the level of smugness I had to deal with was bad enough. But then, they decided to treat me like an idiot child for the next year, rather than the experienced professional that I am. I decided to get the hell out after about 6 months, secured a much better job with higher pay and working conditions. I gave my required 90 days notice. My former colleague manager was so good at their job that they didn't even advertise my job until it suddenly occurred to them that I was due to leave in 2 weeks' time. No one was appointed to my position, and the manager tried to offload my duties onto one of my team, who promptly burned out and resigned due to the workload. The rest of the team resigned for better opportunities elsewhere, and my former boss left 6 months later under a very dark cloud. Story 20. I worked for a company that rents out office space to self-employed people, entrepreneurs, etc. One of my clients approached me about starting a business together that I actually was interested in. I had no clue it was against any rules, so I was really open about it. Like, from conceptualizing the company, to getting licensed to do what we do, to actually starting. My boss never didn't know and never said anything negative about it. Fast forward like 6 months, and there was a new sales manager hired for the company that was a bit of a douche. Within 2 weeks of her starting, she became aware that I had a side hustle and reported me to her. I go into work one Friday and see I have an HR call scheduled for the end of the day, which is never good. So me and my actual boss, not the sales lady, got on the call and I was told I broke a huge rule. I explained that I didn't know and further thought it was okay, since I had been telling my boss about it for almost 9 months at that point. And yet, HR still gave me the option to quit my side hustle and receive a final written warning from them, despite not having any other discipline in my time with the company, or quit the company. I think the fact that my boss at no point stepped up and defended me or acknowledged that she also hadn't known this rule was what made me thank them for their time and leave. Story 21. She gave off this cheerful, friendly appearance, but over time realized she was immature, passive-aggressive, gossipy, and condescending. It was a shame because the workplace itself was great, but she brought the mood down, and the rest of the staff hated her. Story 22. I'm a teacher, and I worked at a school that was in a very tough neighborhood. Most of my students had never been out of the neighborhood. We had to know which kids were in which gangs to not sit them near each other. Fights happened pretty regularly. Substances deals were frequent. There was definitely behavioral issues, but there were also a lot of really good kids just trying to go to school. The principal was on a power trip. She was a bully to kids, teachers, and parents. My first year there, and as a teacher, there were 4 of us that taught that grade level. Year starts in August. By October, one of the 4 was quietly dismissed for inappropriate contact with a student. By early December, another of the 4 had her skull cracked open on a locker while trying to help break up a fight. That left 2 of us and a constant rotation of subs because the principal would not hire permanent replacements. A majority of the time, a sub wouldn't show up, and the students would be split among myself and the remaining teacher. There were all over 40 days when I'd have 45 plus kids in my classroom. I struggled, to say the least. I also got no support from admin. At my end of the year evaluation, my principal said I struggled, but that I could have taken more professional development to help. What if? Every faculty meeting was filled with everything we were doing wrong, never anything positive. The principal took away everything positive. Kids normally had to wear khakis or dockers and polos, but could wear jeans on Friday. Same with staff. She stopped that. She stopped pep rallies. She canceled all dances. Anything that could be positive to encourage kids, she got rid of. 3 of my students wrote her a letter to ask why she took away the 8th grade dance from everyone. And why not just exclude the kids? That caused the problems instead of punishing everyone. They asked me to give her the letter because they were afraid of her. She refused to take it from me and said that they, the students, needed to give it to her. I stuck it out for 3 years, but by the end of my 3rd year, I had already made my decision I was leaving, as much as I would miss my students. Then a murder happened on campus that really cemented my decision. Story 23, I was laid off because of pandemic, but I considered leaving because the HR manager would speak to be about others in the company. She was toxic, Ave, and told me everyone is out for themselves and they are all snakes. She was the only person I didn't like. Story 24, I have the blessed position of being middle management, and it's destroying me. I've had so many bad bosses that I know precisely what kind of boss I don't want to be. I've been exceedingly fair to my employees, to the point that it's caused issues. For example, our company policy is everyone gets to call in 1 day a month. I strongly suggest they take 2, one for errands and one for mental health. I've also taken on a lot of their responsibilities since the triple disinfection has added to their workload, even though it would have been easier if I had just done the disinfection and they did their work. The result has been ungrateful employees who feel entitled to my hard work ethic. I have one in particular who has no call, no showed once a week for the past 2 months. Despite countless conversations about this being unacceptable, she continues to do it. This same employee is also notorious at our site for skipping areas, hiding in areas she isn't even supposed to be in for hours at a time, and lying about the work she's done to just about everyone: me, site contact, customers. You may be wondering why I haven't fired her, or at least written her up, right? Well, a few months back, I had to take my boyfriend for a colonoscopy. I planned ahead to be out that day for over a month. She no call, no showed that day, so I called her around 9 a.m. and left her a message. When she finally texted me back a little after lunchtime, she lied and said she was there. I texted her back that she would be getting a write-up the following day for it. She called my boss and cried about how I was being really unfair, had been dumping a ton of work on her. The work in question was the stuff she was supposed to be doing anyway, and she told my boss that I'd never written anyone else up. My boss believed her, even though I'm pretty sure no company makes a practice of disciplining employees in front of each other, and threatened my job over it. She also took it upon herself to give this employee the rest of the week off and a promotion to lead with an extra $1 an hour raise, even though my boss could have checked our company cloud system for the 16 write-ups I had uploaded at that point. Even though I sent my boss screenshots of her lying to me about being there. Even though I told my boss to call our site contact and hear what he had to say about her general work ethic. That day I discovered that my job was not to make sure everyone else was doing their job. My boss told me that I was ultimately responsible for coverage and the workload. Any attempt to reprimand that particular employee after that day resulted in more threats to my job. I'm not going to try and hold newer employees to a higher standard than I'm allowed to hold the lead to, so the whole team has kind of fallen apart. I have 2 decent employees who do all of their work, and then some, and are always helpful and have great attitudes. Obviously, I'm more inclined to help them when they ask, because I know they need it and aren't trying to push their work off on me. This crap employee and another employee she's friends with are in cahoots to continue the bad behavior. Between the 2 of them, they visit half of the areas one of them is responsible for in a day. Joke's on them, though. I worked with our site contact to get a new company to contract through. They take over in about 2 weeks. As of today, we are not technically under contract with anyone, and tomorrow I'm firing both of them because I don't have to fear the repercussions anymore. Bad boss. Suck and don't decide to favor a crap employee over the manager who blew their back out working 60 hours a week for over a year. Story 25. I left a job after 3 months because the manager threatened to knock me out because I accidentally knocked of the ice cream primer he left on the ice cream machine. I was also diagnosed with severe anemia. Blood levels were at a 6.6, I think. I was cleaning up behind the counter at McDonald's while he called himself cleaning the ice cream machine. He sat the primer at the edge of the ice cream machine. When a customer walked in, I hurried to put the broom at the corner of the wall so the customer couldn't see it. The broom fell and knocked over the primer. I was the only one on front counter, so he had to go get the mop and bucket and clean it up. He then put another cup of ice cream primer in the same spot and said, "Op, if you knock this over, I'm gonna knock you out." I pulled him to the side after making sure there were no customers around to hear me and told him, "If you ever decide to put your hands on me, you can consider me resigned because I will beat the hell out you and leave this uniform on top of you." I wore a sundress underneath my uniform so I could get out of after my shift was up. My mama did not raise me to take being hit or threatened by anyone. She won't even lay hands on me. I found out I was anemic after nearly collapsing after getting dizzy in the back booth. He and my shift manager go mad because I was literally about to faint. He said, "I gave you 2 days off. I don't know why you're so tired, but if you're that tired, you can go home. We don't need you here if you're not going to work." Me, 1, I'm anemic. So no matter how much rest I get, until my blood levels are at a somewhat decent rate, I will be tired. 2, you always screw up my schedule. Malicious compliance. I clocked out and went home after working 3 hours. That next week, a frequent customer offered me a job that paid more and I didn't have to stand all day. I took it and 2 weeks later, showed up at the McDonald's in my brand new outfit for work and turned in my uniform. I've refused to work in another McDonald's. My temper can't take the power trippy managers. I also had a shift manager call my name and tell me I'm taking my lunch 2 hours after clocking in 7 a.m. when I wasn't getting off work that day till 3 p.m. I started at 5 in the morning. Crew manager, OP me, tired from dealing with the drink machine and drive-thru. Didn't have an attitude. What? Crew manager, you're taking you lunch after the grill manager comes back. Me, whatever female manager, Karen, to crew manager. If she said what and whatever to me, I would knock her in her mouth. Me, internally, go ahead and damn try it. I walked to the manager's office where Karen was. Me, Karen, I need to talk to you. Karen, nicely. What is it? Me, I'm not one of your chaps. kids for those that don't know. And I don't appreciate you saying you would hit me in the mouth. You will not ever lay your hands on because I'm not my sister. My sister used to work with Karen years prior. I don't take that kind of mess, and you are more than welcome to try me on it. I have no problems leaving this job behind. Neither of them said anything else about hitting me. Story 26. I worked in a German bakery some years ago for a month. That fits this incredibly well. The staff was some of the nicest people I've ever met. The job paid better than most places, and it had pretty good benefits. But then there was the manager. Crap, what in a hole she was. She was such a colossal that if she visited Japan, the emperor would call Godzilla to help protect the country. On my trial shift, which she scheduled to start at 4:30 a.m. the night before, she screamed at me within the first 10 minutes because I didn't know exactly the places of all the pastries on the shelves or the respective names. She constantly made remarks about construction workers, saying they are always trouble when they came in, as if they are subhumans. She constantly screamed at me to do better, even when I wasn't doing anything wrong. And twice she called me a dumb idiot, incredibly loud in front of the full bakery. I quit on the first opportunity I had and made sure to tell the regional director it was a massive chain. Everything she did to me and the other staff. And apparently I was the first person to bring anything like this up since they opened. Story 27. I had been working at a retirement community in the dining services for almost a decade. The residents were great, the hours were good, and I was making decent money at the time. The scheduling also allowed me to have off every other weekend and also worked with my college schedule when I decided to go back. It all changed when a company got a contract to take over the dining services. They fired all of the management save for a few people. Most of the people they kept were demoted. Sort of thankfully, I was not part of that. They brought with them a new menu and make everything from scratch type deal, which was exciting at first until we saw the recipes. They were awful and none of them had salt or pepper in them. I am talking we had to use a fried chicken recipe without salt or pepper. Of course, cooking from scratch would increase the amount of labor required to run the kitchen from how it used to run, but they didn't increase the amount of cooks on the floor. So everyone's workload was increased a great deal with no help. The first executive chef thought I was bad at my job, despite the protests from the sous chef and other cooks, and he was terrible at keeping stuff stocked. He was fired within 6 months. The second executive chef came from CIA, Culinary Institute of America, and was just a real elitist git. He would quiz us on the 3 ways to thicken sauces and mocked a cook because they didn't mention using arrowroot. He would use a bunch of terminology we weren't familiar with because most all the cooks didn't go to culinary school and chastise us for not understanding him. I had moved with working as a server supervisor in the assisted living health center when I was at one point cut by another chef for telling them not to clean the blade of their knife on with the edge of a trash can. I was written up for provoking him despite their investigation showing I did no such thing. The final straw was when I was sent home early, pending an investigation on me. This was over garlic bread. Our floor was never sent garlic bread for lunch service. We called twice to have some sent down. It never came, but none of the residents were all that upset about it anyway. So I thought nothing of it until my manager came down to ask me about the garlic bread. She was one of the people we spoke with to see about getting some sent down. So I go home and get no updates as to when I can return or if I can or really anything. I call every few days for updates for 2 weeks. The reasoning for why I was sent home for suspension keeps changing. I start looking for a new job and get hired a new place within a week. The day I finalized my paperwork and did orientation at my new job, I get a call from my manager to come in to speak with her and the director of dining services. They tell me a new version of why I was suspended for 3 weeks at this point, without pay, but tell me they are going to give me one more chance. Where the other chances had gone, I don't know. I told them they left me hanging with no communication for 3 weeks. So I quit and I left the office and said goodbye to the residents I come to know and care about. Story 28. I left one job because the management was so terrible. Our division chief assumed that if he and other managers weren't micromanaging us, we wouldn't do our work. He was very against letting us work from home, even though the job could be done 100% remotely. He only started giving us 1 day a week because the person above him forced him. We worked in an area with terrible traffic, one of the worst in the nation. So most people are understanding if their employees are a few minutes late. If we were even a minute late, we'd get a lecture that would frankly take more than the minute we had missed. Here's the real kicker though. If we were late or took a longer lunch or something, we had to post on 3 different supervisor Outlook calendars and our own when we planned to make up that time, even if it was 5 minutes. For example, I emailed all of my supervisors to ask permission to leave 4 hours early on a Friday because I was flying to a wedding. It was approved. I put on all the Outlook calendars when I was making that time up, coming in 30 minutes early, staying 30 minutes late for 4 days leading up to the trip. When I stepped on the plane, I got a frantic call from a coworker saying that one of the supervisors was looking for me and had no idea. I was going on a trip. I told him to tell her to check her freaking calendar. I had already put in my notice by then, so I didn't care if they got mad. If we got to work early, we weren't allowed to leave early unless we had gotten it approved in advance. They had very high turnover because of this. I think they eased up a little after I left, but not much. I wonder how they handled the pandemic and being unable to catch their people checking personal email. Story 29. I will definitely look for something better once Corona is over and I get better chances, and it's 100% because of my boss. The company itself has its problems, but nothing worth leaving over, and actually some good sides too. So, my boss, how should I describe him? He loves to make sexist jokes, the really boring kind. All women care about fashion, need to have 1 million shoes, women need 1 hour in the bath in the morning, and men only 2 seconds, yada yada. He's a massive boomer and loves to tell us. We're mostly in our 30s. How everything was better in the old days. Schools were better, university was better. Basically, our education is bad, and only his generation got to have an actual education. It's so annoying to basically hear all the time how you're stupid. He told me that my master's degree was on the same level that his high school degree was. He doesn't really understand computer, and every time there is an it problem, we get to hear all about how this and that task used to be done by hand, with pencil, on paper, and how us young folks are all so pampered and dependent on the computer. No part of our job can be done without the computer and specialized software nowadays. But he's stuck in the good old days, when you could do it with a typewriter and a fax. Also, computer problems are normal and just computers doing weird computer stuff, so no need to contact it. Also, when we have trouble with the conference calls, he usually tells us that we are probably privately surfing and watching Netflix to cause that. Everybody is pretty overworked, and we desperately need one, better 2 more people on the team. All our boss does is tell us how 500 emails. Day isn't so bad. Well, he's not the one having to answer them. And he even told us to do it like him and apply rules in Outlook to filter out most emails. He doesn't understand that, unlike him, we actually need to react to the 500 emails day in our team inbox, more in the personal inboxes, and that answering one email isn't just typing down a few lines. It means researching in our system, checking, asking other colleagues, etc. He doesn't get it and keeps telling us that answering one email can't possibly take more than a minute. I have 2 life-threatening food allergies, and he loves to tell me how when they aren't real, because in his days, no one had allergies and everybody just ate what was put on the table and nobody passed of eating something. And 2, allergies are just fashionable right now, like gluten intolerance or veganism. Yes, allergies, food intolerance, veganism, it's all the same for him. Just those young people being spoiled and picky about food. I want to get away from him so badly. I'm still stuck in an education the company pays for. As I said, the company is okay, but I'll start applying next year when I get my certificate, hopefully January or February. I'm a little scared, though, that I'll end up with another bad boss. Story 30. It was a smallish company, less than 40 employees. My boss encouraged interdepartmental fights with others' departments, and when I refused to participate, my team ghosted me. I went to the CEO indirectly a few times, finally lost my patience, scheduled a one-on-one with the CEO, and told him he was running a crap show, and if he didn't take actions A, B, and C fast, the company would fail, but I'd be gone long before. 3 weeks later, they walked me out. A year later, they walked the CEO out. Story 31. My best friend and I worked at the same small company, under a horrific boss. My friend got a great new job and gave her notice. In an effort to get her to stay, our boss offered her my job. I don't know why the duck she thought my friend would accept. She knew we were friends. We'd even booked off the same week of holiday to travel together. Of course, my friend said no, and I handed in my notice the very next week. And I let her know why. I mean, there were 100 reasons, but I told her that was the straw that broke the camel's back. She had no idea until then that I knew what she'd done, and the look on her face was priceless as she tried to figure out some way to deny it. Story 32. Changed the commission structure mid-month and did not update sales staff on the new goals. I missed my commission of $3,800 by $4. Was under the impression that I was $500 over my goal. So I let junior sales reps take sales to get them over their goals too, to qualify us for a site-wide bonus. Turns out, they scrapped that too in the new structure. Lost 4 reps in a day over $6,000 in commissions. Company ended up sending most of the senior staff to prison on tax evasion charges soon after we left. Story 33. Favoritism towards the terrible employees that never did their job or did their job poorly, sloppy, minimal effort. I guess you can be a crafty employee as you like to go out and get drunk with the boss. Story 34. Thinking about leaving. CEO is terrible to work with, shifts blame on everyone else, He just waltzes into my office and starts demanding I do random crap, like pay phone bills when I'm a junior mechanical engineer, has me do accounting, all ordering, all inventory management, work weekends, work late every day, report into him before I leave every day, all for just mediocre engineer pay. He's super inconsistent and can get super pissed for random reasons, like threaten your job. All this under the guise of, we're a startup, so we're still getting our crap together. We have 18 engineers, techs, but not a single PM, admin, or HR person. Everyone else is great to work with, and the industry is super cool. Also, I'm only 2 years out of college and made a huge career switch, so I'm behind the curve as far as mechanical engineering goes. Graduated with a computer engineering degree, so I'm not sure if switching jobs and staying in mechanical engineering is viable right now. Story 35 refused to give me a raise he verbally offered in an attempt to keep me around, got a better job while he got demoted. I don't necessarily believe in karma, but this worked out for me. Story 36, a new hire didn't show up for their shift, ducking us over. They showed up 3 hours later and just stood there and didn't help get caught up. Me and the other staffer stayed late to prep the next shift and clean. We told him to get us if he needed help, and told him we were on the other side doing duties. He crashed, burned, and never came to get us. Our manager is an a-hole and sided with him and took our shifts away for 5 weeks, before I just quit after being there for 8 years. This was the same a-hole who told me I tried too hard to be a good employee, and got mad at me for working off the clock because my coworker was getting annihilated, couldn't keep up, and needed the help. He threw his keys at me, punched the ice machine, and made that poor girl suffer the rest of the night. This is also the same manager who raided bodies, the same one who was banned from a different location for being belligerently drunk, and the same one who asked why our other manager would hire a fat girl. So yeah, great person to work for. Story 37. Used to work in a gym. One night, a bunch of patrons utterly destroyed the locker room and showers. I'm talking literal crap smeared on the walls of the showers and messes everywhere. It was awful. Like a poop explosion throughout the entire locker room. It was as if someone had violent projectile diarrhea and tried to turn the locker room into their own Crapstein chapel. It got to the point where the girls finished cleaning up the women's locker room and came in wondering what was taking me and my shift partner so long. They were utterly shocked at what they saw and immediately grabbed every free person they could to come help us deal with the mess. With 7 people, it took us 3 hours to get the locker room clean again, and the place smelled so strongly of Comet that 2 people almost passed out. All the while, the manager on duty was strolling around, eating ice cream, and checking his phone. The whole crew worked crazy hard to finish as efficiently and thoroughly as we could. By the time we were done, it honestly looked perfect, as if whoever unleashed their bowels on our faculties had never set foot in the locker room. The lot of us were very satisfied, even though it was an extremely hard night. When we finally finished, we gathered at the front desk for closing shift sign-out. The manager previously mentioned called me and my partner over and began tearing into us, saying the locker room looked like a ducking war zone. And the only reason we were getting out right now was because it was 2.5 hours past when we were supposed to be done, and we should not have needed help to get to the point that it was at, which he then reiterated was literal crap. He stood there insulting us for 10 minutes, further holding up everyone getting out for the night. As soon as I got home, I typed up a resignation, effective immediately. The next day, my actual manager called me and gave me attitude for giving 1 day's notice. I told him what had happened and ended the conversation there. Never went back. Duck both of those managers. Story 38. Was rushing to make it to a 5 a.m. shift when I got into a major car accident that totaled the front of the car my friend drove, and I was riding in, which resulted in me severely shattering my right arm. Decided to continue on to where I worked, so the car would be safely parked and I would inform the overnight shift that I'll be a little late, because I still hadn't realized my arm was broken then, just to sort out the damage. Getting out of the car, I collapsed face first, but I guess my body was just done with me. Took a cab to the nearest hospital, and that's when I found out my arm was detached. While waiting at Area, I received a call from a colleague saying that my manager was raving like a loony in the parking lot, yelling at security guards for letting me park the bashed-in vehicle. He was cussing at my friend for thinking he could park there, and declaring that he'll have me suspended for getting the company involved and not to expect a single cent to go to my bills and recovery. Everyone heard, everyone saw. I had no intention of blaming anyone, and the car was just parked there. The moment I was cleared for temporary home recovery, I went straight back to work, and he would kid around saying I was too dedicated and next time, deal with my problems before going to work. The same manager would also throw around homophobic slurs in reference to a colleague that was in the closet at that time, and would make extremely lewd jokes in front of new female staff. The older staff have just gotten numb to it because HR never did anything. He later got promoted to an executive position. Most messed up company ever. I myself got reassigned later, then eventually quit after being made to wait for a promised promotion, only to be told that the promoting manager had told everyone I was resigning and to cancel my promotion. Not even going to talk about the mess my colleagues who stayed are now in during the pandemic. Hint, if they didn't show up for work out of fear of the virus, they'll be fired. Now, half of the operations team is at home infected. Story 39. The last few jobs, every single time. Hey, I just need an entry-level position with flexible hours. I know I have tons of management experience and a business degree on my resume, but I've decided to go back to school for a career change. So please, I'm just here to work, pay for school, and go home. I'll even work super hard and be the best, whatever the job. In the store, if not region or even company, but I'm not here to be a manager or take on more responsibility. Fast forward usually 6 months. Hey, we realize you're the best at your job, so here are 1,000 additional responsibilities way above your position or pay, and we will not compensate you. We thought since you're past and demonstrated responsibilities, it was okay. Me, hey, I get it, but can I please just do the job I applied for? Them, how dare you not do what we demand? You're rude and incompetent. Me, for starters, I'm one in this position. Also, I'm literally asking just to do the job assigned to me on my papers, nothing more or less. I'm telling you, I'm happy to work, just not do things above or outside of my pay grade constantly. Them, go home and think about how disrespectful you are. Me, huge sigh. Okay, I quit. Again. Story 40. I'm a teacher. My principal was good, but the superintendent was awful. I was there for 6 years and had seen 3 different superintendents. There was constant nepotism and salary discrepancies, even among teachers. Policies changed constantly, and we were always asked to do more or do something differently, even if we had just changed that thing the previous year. It felt like being in a snow globe. When you thought everything had finally settled, someone would come and shake things up again, and you would feel like you were in the middle of a storm. Rinse and repeat. I am so glad that I finally left that school district and have found my forever job in a new district. It is a low-income school with rough kids, but wonderful management and coworkers. It really makes all the difference. Story 41. Boss does everything to make his employees hate him and then expects us to still want to work there. I've worked at my current job for over 1.5 years. The reason I'm leaving is because I've worked my ass off for them. And the one moment I was trained for, 5 months of training, they gave to their daughter ASAP. I also found out that I almost wasn't given my raise because the boss deemed my behavior as inappropriate, all from little things she could have corrected right on the spot, like moving a box with my hands instead of using my knees, on top of the being called out in front of all staff, being told consistently that all the workers are replaceable, passive-aggressive comments even during a simple request, letting your family members get away with things I would get in trouble for, and saying they won't go anywhere while dwindling your work because they think you'll quit ASAP, making our last floor manager quit because they put so much stress on her, coming in when your wife has COVID, telling employees that if you don't have symptoms, that they need to come into work, even though most customers are older people, and basically being yelled at least weekly, will really make your employees hate you. Story 42. After having 2 years of incredible personal stress, multiple deaths, marriage ending, car accident, etc., 2 weeks after reeling from another unexpected passing, older brother, I was pulled into a meeting and was told, I'm too distracted at my desk and spending too much time at non-work related issues. Trying to explain that I'm the executor of my brother's estate was explained away to me that I shouldn't allow it to affect my work. This is also me doing the majority of my work unassisted because asking for help usually fell on deaf ears or just put in more hours, unpaid of course. There were plenty of other issues, but this broke me. I had a different job in under a month that pays more. I'm still pissed sometimes, but that's fading. Story 43. I was hired onto a state government gig for a 6-month contract to hire at what would have extended out to $70,000 per year salary. Goal was to update their flagship site's CMS from version 2 to version 4, a tumultuous journey, because the CMS's structure and add-ons had changed significantly over those versions. It had been built years prior by someone who no longer worked on that team and had other responsibilities, so they had to bring me on as a subject matter expert in the CMS. I got it done in half the time, despite the site being built like total garbage. The guy who built it did it as his first project in the CMS, and used the rest of the time to help them build additional functionality that was on their wish list. Come contract end, they have more they'd like me to do and other projects they'd love to have me onboarded onto and helping with, so they offered to bring me on as an actual employee at $60,000. They insisted it was the best they could do and that they had to pull strings to get me there. I said yes because I had no other bites at the time, polished my resume, and kept my head down. The day after my official onboarding and HR training, my boss and his boss call me into an office for a meeting about how they're glad to have me on and they expect me to pick up a lot more responsibility and do all these extra things like build reports and crap. After cutting my pay, I gave my 2 weeks the next day. Since state employee salaries were public record, I found out my boss, who made $75,000 when I left, got a $10,000 raise later, shortly after bringing on a boot camp grad who made $45,000 to maintain the site and do the scut work. Leaving was a spectacular move. Story 44. When a recruiter cold called me and said, "Oh, you work at X? I'm sure we can get you at least a 10% raise somewhere else." I started looking around and got a 27% raise. A month later, 5 years at the new place, and I make about 66% more than I did when I left the previous job that I was at for almost 5 years. Keep an eye on places like Glassdoor. Know what you are worth. Don't work for a discount unless there is a really good reason. Story 45. I was told I had to take a heavy piece of hand railing off of the crane and hold it over the edge of a platform while my buddy was underneath it trying to fight a bolt in it. We were about 60 feet off the ground, and this thing weighed probably 100 pounds. If my hand slipped and I dropped it, it would have killed my friend and probably someone on the ground. Well, I said duck, that kept it on the crane, and my boss proceeded to cut in on the radio channel. I used to talk to the crane operator to cuss me, and I snapped. Told him to go duck himself and get his fat little ass up here and do it himself. Got fired for insubordination. If my wife wastes about 6 months pregnant, I would have beat his ass when I got down to the ground. Story 46. Very bad bosses. Very junior me was asked to organize a 100-plus people event in 2 weeks for a new client because my immediate superior was ill. I got no support from other senior colleagues. I made it happen, made some minor faux pas, went there to coordinate alone, and the client team was headed this crazy duo. One would scream at me at every minor inconvenience. The other would complain because she didn't eat vegetables, and all of our menus that she approved the week before had vegetables. I called HQ for help every day. When I got back, they told me the client didn't want to see me ever again, that I had cost them money and I was incompetent. I lost all interest in the job and handed in my notice 2 weeks later. My boss then starts pleading with me, begging me not to quit. Many other in my career level were quitting because of similar behavior. I said I wouldn't change my mind. There were personal reasons involved too. She then lied to me, saying they were planning on opening a new office in my hometown, a European capital where I was headed back to. And if I didn't quit, I could be head of that office. I was 23, and the person telling me this was 48. I was floored by how willing she was to make up such big lies and to trick me. This person still follows me on LinkedIn 7 years later and wrote, hoping we could still collaborate. Are you insane? Of course I still quit. The week after quitting, a friend told me they had tried to sell the new office lie to a girl who was quitting to move to Argentina with her husband. How dumb did they think we were? These people had clearly lost all respect for the humans that were bringing in the dough that made their KPIs. So glad I left. Story 47. Had not one boss, but 3. Each would tell me how they wanted something done, and each would tell me the other 2 were wrong. Finally got sick of getting my ass chewed all day, every day for doing what I was told. Finally caught the 3 of them together, talking with the owner. Politely interrupted and pointed out what was going on. Yo, you 1, tell me how to do something. You, 2 and 3, 2 say it's wrong. You 2, tell me how to do something. You, 1 and 3, 1 and 3, 3, 2 say it's wrong. You 3, tell me how to do something. You, 1 and 2, 2 say it's wrong. And all of you chew my ass for it. Which of the 3 of you do I listen to? They stood there looking at each other, with the owner looking at the 3 of them. After a full minute, I took off my work gloves, handed them to the owner, thanked him for employing me, and quit. I heard from another employee that all 3 were later demoted, and the owner promoted other people to the position with better defined areas of control. Story 48. I could literally write pages about a former boss the company brought over from Europe who delegated most tasks to me and then took credit for them. We would have meetings and he would constantly interrupt to note that I would do, fix, resolve, submit, whatever. Denied me the opportunity to interview for a promotion because he needed me to continue doing half of his job for him, and accused me of being disloyal. When I gave notice, I rattled off a list of reasons why, and his response was to shrug and say, okay, if you're going to be that way about it. Gave him a list of instructions how to perform certain tasks and run reports, and instead of reading it, gave to another employee and told them to call me at my new job if they had questions. A coworker who left around the same time was called in and told, I don't see you being happy or successful at your new job, and that saddens me because we'll fill your position and you won't be able to come back. But good luck anyway. He later was promoted and sent to China, as if the company wanted him to F things up on every continent. The company itself had these initiatives where every few months they encouraged employees to submit ideas for improvement. then failed to implement any of them and blaming the employees for having bad ideas. Story 49. Our department head was retiring and his boss, the big boss, tried to get us to work weekends by basically pulling, once Bob is retired, you need to think about the future and what's going to happen with your career. Crap. Once I heard that gangster bullcrap, I immediately started applying for other jobs. Story 50. I was working in a company that I'm surprised is still open. When I joined, there were red flags everywhere. My boss in week 1 decided she wanted to humiliate me or something, so she asked me to report to a manager. All of them were men. And then publicly asked me if I liked him. I ignored this because whatever right. Then it got worse. The projects were not doable, but we still had to work on them. We were doing the work while the older staff went on holidays, pretended to work, and just generally ducked around. There was a lot of passive aggressiveness. We had to have multiple lunches with the team throughout the month. Then when the waiter came, the boss would look at us, the entry-level staff, and say, you'll pay for the table and we'll pay you back in cash. Like, what the heck? I don't even want to eat with you in the first place. Someone picked a fight with me and then HR decided they weren't interested in the details. Same person invited me shamelessly to their birthday party after complaining to HR and not speaking to me in the office for 2 weeks. Of course I didn't attend, and then for 1 hour I was grilled during work for not attending a birthday party outside work hours. I'm not paid for that at all. Then, after all this bad behavior when the pandemic started, they made us work from the office because our jobs just couldn't be done from home. They could. Around this time, my contract had to be renewed, and I was called in with a few others and asked if I'd like to go on unpaid WFH or something with no pay or resign. I opted to resign, packed my things, and left without a notice period, without having to see their faces ever again. Stayed home during the lockdown and got another job recently that pays 2 times more, and we actually leave on time. Story 51. My store boss, head honcho, was an a-hole on a massive power trip who knew nothing about cars in a big, fancy car dealership. I was a trainee mechanic/tech on apprenticeship wages. I'd report to a head tech guy who was sound and knew what he was talking about. If my boss wasn't around, head honcho would assign me tasks that were way beyond my ability. Had no choice but to learn. Complaining led to others being kicked off the course. I wasn't even allowed to touch customer cars unsupervised. I'd done gearboxes, full services, brake line, replace injectors. Worst task was replacing wiring. I could go on, but back to the main story. Had a Karen who was boss's friend harass his apprentice for a non-existent wiring issue, was told to replace all wiring, twice. No bill to customer. Final straw involved the police called on us and getting suspended. We banded together and went to local media and MP and then HR. We got job back and boss got sacked. Then he got his job back and I knew it was time to leave my dream job. I can tell the story from different angles as well. Story 52. So I used to work at a sandwich place that my sister also worked at. Almost everyone who worked there knew and were friendly with my sister. This is relevant for the reason I left earlier. So I worked there for a few months while in school right before the virus, and they told me that I'm not going to get hours since they are trying to prioritize people who need the money more. I didn't need the money, so I was fine with that. So I don't get put into the schedule for a few months, and my family wants me to ask if there is any chance of me going back to work. I was against the idea since I'm super scared of the virus, but I asked anyway. It took my boss, who was a really nice guy and everyone liked, around a week to respond to me. What he told me was, "We will see what we can do about getting you back on the schedule," and then never heard back from him unless I directly contacted him, which happened one more time. After seeing my fruitless efforts, my sister, who had quit at this point, because she was tired of working there, told me that not only had they hired 2 more people, mind you, they never even asked me if I could come back. But they apparently only hired me because my sister was a good worker there and got along with everyone. When I decided to quit, I told my boss that I didn't want anything else stressing me out since school was about to start, which was true. I didn't say anything about the stuff that had happened because I didn't want to start a whole conflict. Like I said, I wanted to focus on school. Story 53. Horrible boss. I left after the wonderful manager that I was originally hired under quit, and the company got around to replacing her. She was 40s or 50s, with this 19-year-old kid. He let the power go to his head, changed my normal hours without even heads up, blamed me for not calling to check my schedule, and some other things. One of the things that was going on, the old boss knew that we weren't getting our contractually and legally required breaks, so she gave us great leeway. This new kid decided to be an a-hole, so I started taking my breaks and then relaxing in a back room that had clear loss, line of sight, to the shop's entrance. I was then called in the middle of my workday of my full-time job. From his cell phone to my cell phone then started harassing me, claiming that I left cash out, that I spent too much time in the back room, getting upset that I closed down the shop pet when on break, locking doors while doing outdoor cleaning duties, etc. Mind you, this job really was a two-person job with one doing it. I told him to duck off. He threatened to punish me without union while at my full-time job, while calling me from a personal phone to personal phone. Hung up on him. I then started calling to check my schedule. Found it was not posted on time per contract. So I didn't show up one weekend. Then it wasn't posted correctly again after calling, per his instruction, to find out what the schedule was. Again, not posted. Again, didn't show up. He freaked out, blew up my phone. I ignored him. I then waited until the middle of the week, about the time the schedule should be made, and quit over the phone. Story 54. Worked for a business for 3 years. Had a great relationship and reputation. The manager I worked with gets promoted and a new guy is brought in. Instead of trying to learn the dynamic on the department, he was a hard ass. Immediately, we did not get along. I had a trip planned for a few months. I booked the time off well in advance and made the managers aware of the trip. Checked my schedule for the week and new guy scheduled me. I approached him and reminded him about my trip. He basically told me that I had to work now that the schedule was posted. I was not pleased. I went on my trip. He called and asked why I wasn't at my shift. I told him that I was on my trip and wasn't available. He threatened me with a write-up. I just straight up told him that I didn't give a crap and that's the way the cookie crumbles. I never went back. Story 55. My boss liked me and I got away with quite a bit for having an undiagnosed mood and personality disorder. I made a lot in tips and customers adored me. But my coworkers were ducking holes. They would make fun of me behind my back or when they thought I couldn't understand them. My time there, I learned to vaguely understand Korean. They were rude, and one of the chefs was a massive idiot. The last straw was a new girl. I was meant to train who didn't listen to a single thing I said. But even though I was training and I basically had the last say in whether she was hired or not, I couldn't discipline her because we were equal. I lost my cool with her and told her to stop what she was doing in a very stern voice. I guess she felt threatened because she hid in the bathroom for half an hour, and I was able to fix things. When she came back out, I told her to go back to the bathroom until she could clock out, since I had no authority to send her home. The next day, the owner called me in on my day off to talk to me about it, and I just quit on the spot. My not idiot coworker told me that when I quit, the tips went down. And since the owner had a tip share with the cooks and chefs, the a-hole chef's pay took a hit, and he ended up quitting because they wouldn't pay him more hourly. Story 56. Before I switched professions, it was always due to my boss. In the medical field, it's all political and favoritism. Being a dude also makes you lose points when you're outnumbered 50-1. Not trying to be sexist, it's the truth. When one coworker grudges you, it spreads like a disease. Before I jumped professions, I tried to bust my ass off, irradiated myself more than allowed to make the bosses happy and hurry up. Did jobs and became proficient outside of my job description. Jobs that paid $40 per hour versus my $20. Tried to prioritize and make everyone happy. I remember working 60-hour weeks with the promise to get raises, etc. Well, Christmas time came around, no bonuses, not even a ducking happy hour because of money issues, while the director kept flaunting how much more income they have now. I had 1.5% raise that year and maybe next year. The last straw when I was dealing with a disabled lady and had been told to add on the boss's loosely defined friend. I told them that the acquaintance had to wait. Bad idea. I got pulled into the office and was told I'd be placed in a corrective action program. I told her to stop right there and gave them my 2 weeks. Duck 'em raw and dry. Years and years later in a completely different profession. All my jobs I left were for money. My coworkers and bosses have been awesome that I'm still friends with. The last profession put such a bad taste in my mouth and made me chase the cash. I still to do this day think about buying an exotic just to do a giant junk-shaped burnout in their parking lot while waving the finger. Story 57. Worked at a bank where at any given time, it would only be 2 to 3 of us manning the joint because it was an express bank. When my manager drops a deuce, he takes forever. Well, it's only him and I ever using the men's room because we're the only males at this location. So I know when he just dropped a smelly one. One day, it was just me and my manager in at the time. In the morning, he was gone for a good 45 minutes in the men's room while I handled all the transactions. I knew it was a deuce because it smelled like it after I used it shortly after. That same day, he disappeared for another hour in the afternoon in the restroom, and I just thought he was having one of those crafty days. It's annoying when it's just us two because obviously I'm doing all the work. Well, when he finished, I went to go use it and noticed that it didn't smell. Before I started to pee, I noticed some white residue floating in the toilet. After careful inspection, I confirmed that it was definitely his sperm. So yeah, started applying for jobs on that same day. Found a job a couple weeks later, didn't put in my 2 weeks, and told him the day. Before that, I was quitting. Regional manager stopped by same day to convince me to stay, because they would have been short-staffed at that location if I left, declined, told the regional manager why, and never looked back. Side note, a year later, found out that manager didn't last much longer at this bank and got let go. I wonder why. Story 58. I was a chef for years and want to get back into it. Look over on Kitchen Confidential. The other day, one of the head chefs went onto the subreddit and stated that one of the kids that has worked there for a year or so and it's his last day tomorrow. What should he do to him on his last day? Some of the answers were unbelievable. Berate him all day. Lock him in the freezer for an hour. When he's changed and ready to go, throw loads of flour eggs and sugar at him. These are the people who I've been working with all my life. I've seen people spit in customers' order only once, though. An old guy called John used to force kids to pick up plates that had been under the grill all day and refused to let them use a tea towel. A guy Neil stuck some kid's hand in the fryer for 5 seconds to get rid of him. People breaking and stealing other people's equipment so they can't do their job properly. People lie about the time all the time and have no respect for hygiene whatsoever. There are good chefs out there, but they're few and far between. Is this normal in other jobs? Story 59. This is so relevant to me today. I took up a graduate internship. So paid, but sub-minimum wage. I'm doing a master's degree, so I specified part-time, and she agreed. Today, on my 4th consecutive day, I quit. My industry is luxury fashion, and sometimes in this industry, you will meet certain people whose self-importance has overcome them. Everyone should know what they're thinking, exactly what they want in real time. In short, I was more stressed in these 3 days than I've been the entire time I've been studying and working in this industry. You know what happens when someone is that on edge? They make dumb mistakes they never made whilst working on other projects. Mistakes that a boss like that will reprimand, will sigh at you, will make you feel you are unworthy or working on their special projects. She said I didn't listen, implied I was totally incompetent. This is on my 2nd day, working alone, on a job that should require at the very least 2 people, staying late to get her shot done for her for today, and not getting paid for it. She wanted a fully fledged robot assistant, but didn't want to pay for it. So she thought she'd get an intern, but make no attempt to actually explain anything. This morning, I realized I had forgotten something and the panic hit me like venom, going straight to my heart. So I quit. I did learn one thing. I don't want back in the industry. I'm going to finish my master's and do something actually useful instead of getting pressure cooked by these bananas. Story 60. Worked for a large private ambulance company. Global large. I'm a combat vet and my partner at the time was 19F. We got shot at on scene. Granted by an idiot, not intentionally. While driving, I let our dispatch know while my partner took care of the patient. A week goes by with no one checking in on us. I emailed the leadership and union to ask WTF. The company leadership says they will do an investigation. A couple days go by, and their response was because we didn't tell our supervisor it was our fault. Our union agrees with the decision of the company and does nothing to support myself or my partner. As I told the leadership in my case, not really a big deal. However, my partner, who had a mental breakdown after the call, they didn't do anything to support. Funnily enough, even a year later, not a single person in the leadership asked how she was doing. While dealing with all of this, my house burned down. And again, not a single person from the company asked how I was doing. Damn. One of the fire departments we support actually donated some money to help us get back on our feet. My company let me take a none-paid time off with no support. What did your boss do that made you quit your job on the spot? Story 1. This was years ago. When I interviewed for this one job, I made it very clear to the owner that in 10 months' time, I had a family commitment to go out of state for 10 days. Non-negotiable, I was going, period. I did not want to accept the job without him understanding I would take that time off, no matter what. And of course, it would not be paid time off. I'd be willing to work out to make up hours or come in on weekends, whatever. The owner thanked me for being upfront, checked his calendar, and told me it would be fine. I reminded the owner of our agreement several times in the following months, and his reply was always the same, no problem. A week before my scheduled time off, I remind him one last time and he says, no, you can't go. We went round and round for a few minutes with me reminding him of the conditions of my hire and the many times he said I could go. He refused to budge. I packed up my stuff at lunch, went home, and never went back. Story 2. Back in 2007, I was working for a fast food pizza place that shall remain unnamed. This store had a policy that you couldn't call to check your schedule under any circumstances, and they also had a nasty habit of changing schedules that had been posted. I took a week off to visit some family and confirmed after the next week's schedule had been posted that I didn't work the day after I was supposed to get back in town. Well, on my drive back, I got stuck in a pretty horrific traffic jam and knew that I wouldn't get back to town before the store closed. I called the shop, explained my situation, and told them I just wanted to confirm that I wasn't working the following day. The manager guided me out told me I knew the policy and that I should really be more responsible. So I hung up, gritted my teeth through the traffic jam, and shut my phone off as soon as I got home. The next day I woke up and turned my phone back on. The schedule had indeed been changed at the last minute, and they had put me on to open the store. I had probably 15 missed calls, about 24 texts and a few voicemails telling me to get my ass into the store and open in time for the lunch rush. I rolled back over and passed out for another 2 or 3 hours, had a leisurely cup of coffee after I woke up again, took a long shower, and turned in my uniform sometime that afternoon. They tried to get me to sign a write-up for missing my shift. I told them I would have been there on time if they had just told me over the phone that I was working that day. Found a new job that afternoon, if I remember correctly. Story 3 was working as an assistant manager at a fast food chicken chain for a while. We were located next to a high school, so we usually had a bunch of high schoolers for employees. One night we were understaffed because 2 of our cashiers called in, so it was myself working drive-thru alone. My cook was packing orders for me. If he wasn't busy, I had a 16-year-old dude on front register. Our lobby was a lot slower than Dot on this night, so he was able to pack his own orders for the most part. But our dishwasher was helping him a little bit when he could. The 16-year-old wasn't a fast worker. He wasn't really great at the job in general, but he was very good at following instructions. He'd get distracted and try to talk to the employees or customers a lot more than he needed to. But if you told him to focus up, he would buckle up and get it done. He didn't hide his stress very well, though. Anyways, we were busy this night, and the kid up front was stressed out. I was at the date window, but I could see him pacing back and forth. I told him to take 10 out back if he needed to cool down, but don't rage on the front line. He tells me he's good and not to worry about it. Well, like 5 minutes later, I hear my cook shouting the cashier's name. Cashier falls on the ground and starts having a seizure. My cook was an older guy in his 50s and had actually lost one of his sons a few years prior to something similar. So he rushes over to hold our cashier's head to keep it from hitting the ground. Though when the cashier fell, his head did hit the ground. I called 911 right away. I got customers in the lobby trying to help, but a lady comes behind the counter and immediately slips on the floor because she doesn't have non-slip shoes on. So I'm trying to keep people from coming behind the counter. We have a fire department like right next door, so they were there very fast. Now onto the part that made me quit my job. I haven't mentioned my boss yet, but he's your stereotypical dude who doesn't give a crap about anything but money. I tried calling him right after I got off the phone with 911. No response for about 15 minutes from him aside from a text telling me he's busy and not to bother him. I told him it's an emergency, our 16-year-old had a seizure, and I needed to get his medical info on the computer. Because the paramedics were asking about his meds, I told them I couldn't help them, but his mom could. I had her contact info on the store PC, but my paranoid ass boss changed the password on me because he didn't want us looking at any business information after a previous argument we had. The medics were reasonably annoyed, but we were able to use the employee's phone because he didn't have a lock on it, and we were able to call his mom from his phone. She got to the store within 5 minutes with his meds that she said he didn't take that morning. I decided to close the store during this event, and about 25 minutes later, my boss finally calls me, asking what happened, because I sent him a picture of the blood on the floor with a very aggressive message. I told him I closed the store for the evening and he wanted to argue with me about it. I told him if he wanted to keep the store open, he should hurry up and get here, because I'm gonna clean up the blood behind the counter and then go home. I was beyond livid at this point, not to mention embarrassed, because of how little. I was able to help the paramedics with his emergency contact info. If that boy had his phone locked or didn't have his mom listed as mom on his phone, he probably would pass that night, as I was told by the paramedics. My cook was in shambles. His wife usually picked him up and dropped him off at work, and since it was near closing time, she was already waiting outside. She came in when the fire truck showed up, so she saw everything. She was helping clean up our lobby because there was only 3 of us left to close the store, and she was a very nice lady. I told her to not worry about it, but she just went on about it anyways. Boss shows up and he keeps insisting I should have kept the drive-thru open. I told him to come outside with me because I needed a smoke. He kept bickering and bickering to the point where I just said, well, maybe you should duckin'. Pick up your phone when I call you. I don't give a crap what you are doing. This is your business, not mine. Also, I'm giving you my 2 weeks right now. Not that you deserve it. He offered me a raise if I stayed, because I've threatened to quit before, and that's how he kept me from leaving. I told him no and that I was done with his crap. So next day I come in and see that he changed the schedule to have me on 7 days straight. I called him and told him that was most likely not legal and I wasn't doing it. He told me he needed to hire another AM and that he couldn't be in that week because of that. I told him good luck, left my key in the safe, and left the store never to return. Story 4. I got hired as a prep cook at a local pub, brewery about 15 years ago. I was extremely excited to get into the culinary field as I had a passion for cooking and wanted to make a career out of it. I was great at the job, picked things up quickly, learned the way chef liked things, and all was going great. Fast forward a week, and the dishwasher goes on vacation. Chef says I need to fill in for him. Okay, I'll fill in for the dishwasher for a week, no problem. First couple shifts go smoothly. Then comes Friday night. We get absolutely hammered. I'm talking full house, people waiting non-stop for almost 2 hours. I'm scrambling to keep up as quickly as the small dishwasher will wash dishes, while also running around to the server stations and grabbing the bus tubs to bring back to the dish pit. There were 5 service stations. I had just finished bringing all the bus tubs into the pit, so there wasn't a dirty dish left in the house that wasn't in the pit. Obviously, the sink was full. Chef walks by and starts berating me. "What the duck are you doing? How hard is it to wash dishes? I could do a better job with 2 broken arms." To which I said, "Okay, a hole, do it then." Took my apron off and walked out. I learned that day that my passion for cooking doesn't mean I want to work in a kitchen. Story 5, bit of a long one, so bear with me here. Back about 8 years ago, I had just started working in the commemorative coin and metal industry, doing telesales, calling existing customers to talk about new products. And obviously the end goal was to make sales. Now bear in mind, the majority of people that buy these things are elderly people looking to invest in precious metals for their grandkids. Totally scummy industry, but I've always had pride in my ability to do the job well, while also being ethical. Never pushing a sale when I believed a customer to either be vulnerable or not, mentally well enough to make decisions about buying such expensive items. So one day I get called into the meeting room with the manager and director of the company. They seemed pretty annoyed, so I asked what was up. They said they'd listened to one of my calls and were shocked at what I did. They had the call recording ready to go, so they played it, and as soon as they did, I knew exactly which call we were listening to. It was one of my regular customers, a lovely old lady that I'd built up a good relationship with. She burst into tears as soon as we got talking, as she just found out that week that she had cancer and probably didn't have much time left. Obviously, my reaction was to comfort her, and I told her not to worry about buying any new coins this month. I said, just focus on your health and the more important things for now, and that I'd give her a call next month to see how she was. They immediately called me out for not attempting to make a sale, or even bother at least telling her about the new products. I asked if they were serious, or if they were just winding me up, as it was generally that kind of place. Where people were always pulling pranks and stuff, they were dead serious. I absolutely saw red and lost my temper with them. Told the director exactly what I thought of him, his shady business practices, and his disgusting lack of empathy. Told them both to duck off and walked out. Sad that I never got to speak to that lady again. Story 6, I had a fast food job in high school, and it was an okay gig, until it wasn't. The summer before I left for college, the store owner of 40 years retired, and the business was bought by a couple in their early to mid-40s, I would guess. They stood up and gave a speech about how they'd been in the system for 10 years and anticipated a smooth transition. Well, I don't know what system they were in, but it wasn't one that prepared them for this role. It started out with them not knowing how and when to order supplies, so we ran out of basic foods and packaging. As the person working the drive-thru, it is so fun to spend a 10-hour shift telling every customer that we're out of something that is in 90% of the menu items. They were so understanding, since clearly the 18-year-old working the register is responsible for ordering crap. Then, they started hiring their friends' lazy 15-year-old daughters, who were not only useless, but an active hindrance during a rush. As the summer went on, the good employees started dropping like flies. My day finally came, about 3 weeks before I was due to leave for college anyway. I asked one of the 15-year-old crapheads to do something for me while they leaned against the counter and talked, and I was told, "Can't you see we're busy here?" I turned around, told the supervisor I was done, took off my shirt and hat, and walked out of the building in the middle of a rush. It was a good thing in the end, because had I stayed on, I think I would have just gone back there the following summer, between my freshman and sophomore years of college. Instead, I ended up finding a really cool job in a touristy area of my state that was an absolute blast and changed the course of my life. Story 7. When I worked at Chopper Price in the bagel department, which also was a part of the bakery department, which is on the other side of the goddamn store, I was getting the boxes of frozen bagels from the freezer at about 5 o'clock in the morning, and each of these boxes is about 30 pounds. I loaded about 11 of these boxes onto my U-boat and was about to grab the last box when I slipped on some of the ice on the floor, fell back and hit my back square on the side of a pallet, and was paralyzed for like 10 minutes in this -30 freezer. When I was finally able to get up, I painfully made my way to the front of the store to go into my store manager's office and tell him that I had to fill out an accident report before leaving because I just hurt myself really badly. He told me that I was lying, despite it being caught on camera, as I left the freezer door open, so I wouldn't get locked inside, and that camera is able to see perfectly inside that freezer. Then, when I pointed this out, He told me not to call a doctor, take 2 Tylenol and get back to work. I was in so much pain and I was so mad at that. I told him to go damn himself. And I had called the doctor on the way from the freezer to his office and to pull out the damn accident report because I was filing one before I left. And I was going to leave early and go to the doctor's for this. He rolled his eyes and told me that I would be costing the company money. And if I really wanted to do this because it would look bad for them, and I told him, tough, I want to fill out that report. So he goes on his computer that's facing away from me and he asked me the information and he's clacking on the keyboard. And at the end, he said, there, I sent it. And I said, good. I duck and quit and left. Of course, when I went to the doctor and I told them it was a work-related injury, they wanted me to get the paperwork for it. So I called up HR to see if they could send me paperwork and stuff. And they said they never received an injury report. Maybe it's because I was so hurting and pissed at my manager. But I went on tirade and I ripped the store manager apart to H. And I called out every single issue and violation going on with the store that everyone was too afraid to talk about because they're non-union and they're afraid that they lose their jobs. I also ripped apart the bakery manager who emotionally and verbally abused us to tears and has made phobic remarks to us. When I went back a week later to collect my last check, that store manager and the bakery manager were gone, apparently when they did their investigation and saw that I had not only been telling the truth about falling, but they had also caught the bakery manager doing a substances deal on the back dock, and the store manager tested positive for substances. This is all hot goss from my ex-coworkers when I went in though, so I don't know how much of it is true. Also, that store manager had me climb a 15-feet ladder to clean a light fixture. That was definitely not part of my job description, and as a joke, hit him shook the ladder. Mind you, this was in the middle of the cafe part of the store. There was a lot of customers who witnessed it, and a couple even yelled at him and asked me if I was okay because I had a panic attack. Duck that guy. Story 8. They fired another woman for taking too much time off to care for her dying grandmother who raised her. For context, she was a lower-level admin. I was a database administrator. I had been taking time off just like her because my mother-in-law was dying. They fired her. Her skills were easy to replace. I quit that day. My skills were not easily replaced. Story 9. I wished at a Fazoli's for 5 years. I started at a location about 40 minutes away because there was one being built, Hanoi, 10 minutes away from me. A few years later, I was promoted to a salaried assistant manager job. 6 months later, we hired a second salaried asset MAGR at the end pay I was making. Whatever. She was an outside hire and was a salaried manager where she came from. When our 1-year reviews came around, I was running the store, doing weekly inventory, all the ordering and sales projections, submitting weekly labor, doing the weekly schedule, everything but the stuff only the GM needed to do. She was still struggling to show up on time to open and often left early. She applied to be an opener, which is the 7 to 4 shift. She usually showed up after 7:30 and left before 3. We had to pay the other openers to sit in the lot and wait for her. I had mentioned it several times to the GM, who had repeatedly said he'd take it up with the area manager. At our 1 year, we both got the same raise, and it was the minimum. I asked the area manager about it. I was streaming mad. I gave her a rundown of all the issues, which I thought would be a review of what she knew. The GM had never said a thing. Her response was I was being petty and was ignoring my own failure to advance professionally. I then showed her my GM training book, which was well over half complete. Her only response was, while I'd been doing this role for a year, it took me 3 years to get to AST manager, and my coworker had completed the associate and the manager training in only a year. I told her if she had so much confidence in the other manager, she could do inventory, ordering, and schedule, and in under 40 of the expected 48 hours, and handed her my keys. The area manager called me 2 weeks later. She had told the other manager she'd help her, but she had to be there for full shifts. The other manager couldn't handle it and left after only 2 weeks of working her full schedule, and she wanted me to come back. I told her I wasn't cutting it for her before. There was no reason to think I would cut it now. I heard from one of my friends there that it was a total crap show. I'd done the projections and ordering so long, the GM and AM got the next 2 weeks wrong and ran out of almost everything, and were understated on the busiest shifts. Story 10. I was working at a plant nursery, and the owner would yell at us every single day for not working fast enough, even though we were literally running as we worked. After I'd been there for just under a month, things came to a climax when the owner collectively called all 5 of us useless ducking idiots and spoiled rotten children. We were all university students in our 20s, working our hardest. One girl stopped in her tracks when the owner said that, dropped what she was holding and walked directly to her car and drove off without saying a word. The rest of us worked awkwardly for the last hour of work. I didn't show up for any more shifts and stopped by a week later to collect my checky. There were no employees left at the business, and its busiest season was starting in a few weeks. I wish I had also just walked directly to my car and left as well, but I was in too much shock. I got a new job within a week, which led me to where I am today. Story 11. So I worked at this local gas station that's got a reputation for being a trash employer. Locals have literally told me they would be happy to apply, if only the higher-ups would quit, retire. I'm in New Mexico. The company running the gas stations is out of Texas. So my location was this tiny little building that some people swore was 100 years old. The lot was huge though. So upper management decided to build an entirely new building. Perfectly reasonable. For small town reasons, the post office got about 1/4 of the physical building space. They had to rush through building the exterior before winter, so the snowstorms wouldn't damage anything inside. Also reasonable and pretty normal out here. So the upper management decided to try to get a nice red-colored polished concrete floor, except someone rushed that too, and completely ruined it so bad that we couldn't effectively mop. The floor was covered in these little ridges that trapped dirt, the way white baseball pants attract grass stains. This was especially true in the kitchen, where no matter how hard we tried to scrub with the mop, we just could not get the floor clean, at all. My assistant manager even went to the hardware store and bought a scrub brush with his own money, and even that didn't work. So we eventually give up trying, and we give up reporting it after a month. If they won't listen to us after an entire month of having the kitchen fully functional, they're not going to. It took a good 4 months after opening before the kitchen was complete. Something else the upper management did, they intentionally did not add a back room when they made the building designs. So 8 to 9 months after the grand opening, the big boss finally comes to see us. I'm on the opening shift that day. Been there since 5:30 a.m., 3 o'clock, and I'm ready to clock out and go home. And he pulls us all into the back room for a staff meeting, so he can talk down to us about the shape the kitchen's in. He didn't even buy tools for us first. He just told us how bad it looked and that the other store with only one staff member somehow had a clean kitchen. Spoiler alert, their kitchen didn't get used when only one person was working at a time. Just full on ignoring everything that we had reported. And then he says that nobody is leaving until the kitchen is clean, after talking down to us and acting like nothing we did mattered. 2 hours later, and I was just shy of having a meltdown at work. So I left my key on the counter, apologized to the assistant manager, and left. 3 days later, I went back to return my uniform shirts and name tag. Story 12. My time to shine. You'll love this. Although it might make a few ulcers out there, play up a little with secondhand frustration. Short version. It was 4:57 p.m. in some warehouse delivery admin hellhole. We worked in crafty temporary cabins outside the main warehouse, which doubled as its storage, with an adjoining toilet whose floor was permanently sticky with old urine and whose walls were absolutely festooned with snot. And a few rare gems aside, it was all run by some of the most hostile and incompetent people with whom I've ever worked in my entire life. The shift, among about 10 of us, was clearing out to make room for the next shift, who were turning up and obviously wanting to log in. I remained seated. My deskmate asked why I wasn't letting my replacement log onto the system, and I said that my faith in that workplace was so low that I wouldn't put it past our bosses to discipline us for leaving early, even though it was 4:58. So my deskmate and I, agreeing that the place would duck us any chance it got, reluctantly remained seated until the work clock ticked over to 5 p.m. I swear, in a room full of people clearing out and new arrivals eagerly logging on, we sat there like total squares until exactly 5 p.m., and then we left. I remember my replacement giving me a withering look when I finally surrendered my seat, as if I were a git, keeping him standing and waiting when there was plainly no work in front of me. I sympathized with him. The next day, Fat Pat, the office supervisor, came bustling in and announced to the room that we all had to go into the training room for a frank and one-sided discussion about yesterday's display of leaving early. I said, Pat, I presume this doesn't include me and Chris. We stayed until exactly 5 p.m., and Pat spake thusly. No, you two get in there as well. Yes, you stayed until 5 p.m., but you weren't sitting all the way upright in your seats, and a passing manager saw it and thought it looked really unprofessional. I gave up right there and then. I refused to go into the room for conduct training, and instead spent that time drafting a resignation letter. A week later, I was working as a barman. The following year, I started an MSc year in another country, and I never looked back. Duck that place. I was washing it off me for months. Not just the environment, but the total dog crap attitude. Sure, they paid me a pittance, but that wasn't the worst part of the job. I'd have quit even if they had paid me 5 times as much as they did. Story 13. I came to work for the company I had been a summer help for 4 years through college. I was supposed to study under the electrician and PLC programmer. Because he wanted to retire in a few years, and no one else knew anything about either job. Well, he decided to retire 1 month after I started, and the boss talked him into staying an extra month so that I had time to learn. He was a terrible teacher, and I learned nothing from him in those 2 months. When he left, it took me about 4 months, but I had learned how to design, build, and install electrical control panels, design electrical systems for our projects, and program 4 different plaque types from scratch. The previous guy was horribly disorganized, and I could not find many of the previous programs he had written. One day I was looking for one so that I could go in the field and work on it. Couldn't find it. My boss said he would look, couldn't find it. This thing is not where it is supposed to be, and I had to hope I could extract it from the current plaque. My boss wasn't having it. He ripped me a new asshole for not saving things properly, in front of all my coworkers and other people on that job site. I wouldn't back down because it wasn't my fault. I didn't write that code and had never seen it. The fact that it wasn't my fault wouldn't register to him. So we had the two of us going back and forth for about 20 minutes. I finally said, "Duck you a hole, I won't work for you," and I walked back to the office. About a 2-hour walk. He called me a few times on the way back and I wouldn't answer. He was waiting at the office when I strolled in, apologized that he took things so far. I told him, I have nothing to apologize for, because all I did was defend myself from false allegations and meant every word I said. I never stopped to personal attacks. I got in my truck and left, never went back. I had good friends there that say they still don't have anyone to work on PLCs, and this was 10 years ago. It's much better for me because I now make 6 figures because of my PLC and electrical knowledge. I left there making $20 an hour. He ruined a good thing for him because he's trying to hire a PLC person at $18 an hour. Story 14. I once managed a store for a large, but now defunct, pet store chain. Like all retail, their big thing was the upsell. If a kid wanted to replace their dead goldfish, you were supposed to launch into, well, you should really get a filtered system. And if you want to save on cleaning, get a Plico or some snails. You'll still need chemicals though, and they'll be lonely without little froggies. Oh, and a light. Then you'll be all set up for the future. When you want a few more fish, yada yada. My personal philosophy was if a kid's goldfish died, I would just give them a new fish. Free. They launched this stupid employee program called Fish Baseball. It was something like for every $25 of sales, the employee would get a base. Over $200 was a grand slam or some crap. At the end of the month, the employee with the highest score in the company would win bragging rights. So I didn't do any of that crap. I was working at least 60 hours a week, paid for 40, and one day the regional manager called to berate me about not doing the baseball thing. Fair enough, but then he said, if we can't trust you to follow this program, how can we trust you to run the store? So I said, good point, I'm out. He stammered and stuttered and tried to butter me up to stay, but I told him to pound sand. Felt so damn good. Story 15. This was back in 2018. To understand why I quit on the spot, you need to know the backstory. Started working at a IT managed services provider. It provided to clients, etc. It was for a level 2 position as well. Really small company, probably about 7 staff in total. Oh, and his office was the size of a studio apartment with 3 cameras in the ducking room on all corners. Oh, and 70% of the staff were women too. So go figure right. 3 days into the job, I get put in my boss's car and driven around the city being berated on a ticket I did. Apparently, I missed a minor detail. Felt really uncomfortable, but decided to soldier on. 5 days later, I get taken down the road with my boss, who then proceeds to berate me about using my phone in the office. I told him I was checking for updates from my father who was in hospital, and he said to me in the eye, "Are you bullcrafting me?" Dead set, nearly knocked the out then and there. About a week later, he comes back into the office and sits down next to me, demanding to see all the tickets I've done. He goes through every single ticket I've done and rips me apart on them in front of the entire office. It was utterly humiliating. This went on for 90 minutes straight. My lunch break was coming up and I figured I'd go check my contract, see what I'm entitled to, and then quit when I came back. But he just kept going and going. 90 minutes later, I asked to go to the bathroom. I checked my contract and then told him I'd like to speak privately to him. He got super uppity and angry, but agreed. We walked 2 meters over to his office that just had a crafty slide door covering it. I told him I quit effective immediately, thanked him for the opportunity, but said the role was not for me, as I did not think I was the right person for the job. I was nothing but professional, but he acted like a child the entire time. Got super offended I dared to quit in front of him because I refused to be treated like crap, nevertheless in front of everyone else. I had bills to pay, but I didn't care. I was not going to be a punching bag for anyone. 2.5 weeks I lasted at the job, and I've taken that experience with me. I won't take crap from anyone, especially if they are my boss. Story 16. Not taking my legitimate criticism and professional input seriously. I worked at a grocery store, click and collect part-time during college. The weekends are the busiest days, literally being inundated with orders from 8 a.m. all the way to when we close at 9 p.m. Time after time, I keep telling my manager that we need more people working the weekend shifts to keep up with orders. Seriously, it was a real crap show. But he always went, it's fine. You guys can handle it. I also kept insisting that we needed to update the POS systems in our department because they kept failing at the worst time. BTW POS. In this case stands for point of sale, not piece of crap. But I'd argue those pauses were pieces of crap. There were many times where we would have a backlog of 6 people waiting for their groceries, and I come out with their stuff, and then, the POS system breaks down and I can't ring the person up, which just makes us even more delayed. I asked my manager to have the POS systems updated, and he just said, it's all fine. Those systems do it all the time. One day, on another weekend shift, once again it was a real crap show. We were completely behind on orders, and the POS system broke down again, and the IT guys came to take a look. As they were walking me through troubleshooting, I just had an internal thought. I'm in college. I have a decent amount of money saved up. Do I really need this job and the stress that comes along with it? And then I just got up and said, I quit. One of my coworkers asked, "Are you serious?" And I just said, "Yup," packed my things and went home. Sent in my 2 weeks notice that night. Fortunately, I was in a position where I could just up and leave. But some people have no choice and have to do jobs like that for their entire life. I feel for you guys. I only worked there for a year, but I felt like I aged 20 years working that part-time job. Story 17. I was a decent employee, not the best at the location, but I came in every single time someone else couldn't. And the first time I call out is when my brother has COVID before the vaccine. He tries to force me to show him medical documentation for proof. I quit over the phone right then and there. Story 18. When I was out of school, I got a technical position at a small engineering firm. It was a contract gig. I wanted full-time, but they assured me the contract was more a probationary thing, and after the 6 months, they would hire me full-time. After the 6 months, they gave me another 6-month contract after making a similar excuse. They liked my performance. They were just a job-by-job company and didn't want to take people on. A position came up elsewhere for a government technical job, unionized, great pension, etc. But still contract. Switched jobs and went there. The government job has a 2-year minus 1 day clause, where they let you go to avoid temp contract workers from being allowed to pay into the pension. Getting in full-time, though, is like winning the lottery. Lots of hiring by nepotism. I was unable to get full-time with a government gig, so naturally I reached out to the previous company to see if they needed help. They said sure, but same song and dance. 6-month contract only. They aren't hiring full-time. I said sure, but after 6 months I want permanent. Boss man agreed. My role this time was to help build out software testing, something we would subcontract out to another company to do for us. To help us save the markup the sub was charging us. As part of building out this team, they hired a woman a few years older than me to be the supervisor for this team of just us two. A few months after she started, I learned she was a permanent employee, and they gave her it right off the bat. Benefits, vacation, etc. I also learned she was taking all the credit for all the work I was doing. I gave my 2 weeks notice and applied to the company we would subcontract the work out to. They offered me permanent immediately and have been with them for 6 years now. The old company tried reaching out to me, asking if I would do work for them on the side. Because once I left, they realized my manager didn't know up from down. She ended up quitting too soon after that. Obviously, that was the end of that software division, and the engineering manager above her was let go for letting it all happen under his watch. Story 19. I worked at a shop selling cheese, hams, olives, and fine wine. Called a delicatessen shop, I think. The running up to Christmas was always busiest, and the owner would get stressed out. A few days before Christmas, it was starting to get busy. We were, of course, understaffed because the owner was a cheap ass and didn't want to hire extra people. We had a ham slicer to, slice ham. The golden rule was that if you started using it, you do not walk away from it. You slice the ham you need to slice, turn it off, close the blade, and leave it as you found it, ready for the next person to use. I was slicing some ham while a coworker asked for some help getting a cheese off of a higher shelf. I said I'll be right there. Gotta finish my ham. Owner walked behind me, pushed me towards the spinning blade in a get out of my way kind of fashion, and yelled at me how I should have helped my coworker. I reminded him of his own golden rule and said if he'd ever push me towards the blade again, or even touch me, I'd be gone. He looked me in the eye while he walked back towards where he came from and pushed me toward the blade again. He was a 55-year-old grown man at the time. I was a 16-year-old kid. I looked him in the eye, threw the entire ham in the trash, took off my uniform, and told him to go duck himself. The next day, when I didn't show up for work, he called me about 10 times. sent me messages asking where I was. I never bothered to reply, ignored his calls over Christmas, and hoped he choked on a damn olive. Story 20. Sorry to cheating because I got talked back into staying, but it goes back to my retail days. Assistant manager was an older woman, and always quite high-strung. If she was having a bad day, would take it out on the staff. One example is she had to reprint a receipt for me. Only managers had approval to do so, and when she was printing it, she kept reprinting the first receipt from the day. I pointed this out to her and told her she needs to select one from the bottom of the list, and she started giving me crap directly in front of the customer, saying things like, "You think I don't know how to do my job?" Clearly she didn't, as she couldn't understand why. When she selected the same receipt, the wrong one would print every time. Anyway, there was one day I was asked to outsale stock out on a rail, keep it organized by price and style. An easy task and one that can take your entire day, as you filter through tubs, not knowing what is in them. I spend the morning going through it and get through about 4 rails worth of clothes. Pretty good progress, but now it's lunchtime, so I'm going to be gone for an hour. I outbeat tubs in the back and go get food, and then come back an hour later. I come back to get yelled at for the unorganized clothes. Why aren't these grouped together? Why are the prices all mixed up? This got louder and angrier after I pointed out that, shockingly, while I was on my lunch, customers would have been picking them up and putting things back wrong. As she continued, I just turned and walked out the back, got my coat, and walked out the door. I was halfway home when the store manager phoned me, not the rude assistant manager, and asked me what happened and talked me round to coming back. She was always pretty reasonable and actually managed to get me an apology. I didn't hang around in that store much longer after that, but had that phone call not happened then, that would have been me quitting there and then